2, 1.
Hello to everybody. Before jumping into the introduction, I would like to just make sure that everybody is agreeing with recording the current session. It is important for us to present afterwards to the public the result of this webinar and discussions. And if the people who are participating in the audience are interested to ask questions, you have the tools necessary for that in this webinar to address questions to the speakers that will be afterwards picked up by the facilitator, and you will be responded in the question and answers part of our webinar. We would like to thank you for participation, for taking the time for such an important discussion. My name is Ramona Duminicioiu. I am a peasant from Romania in Eastern Europe. I am from a peasant organization called Ecoruralis, and here I am speaking as the European Coordination Via Campesina, and a European Confederation of Peasants organization who has been for a very long time active on supporting the voice and the rights of peasants and people who are working in rural areas. I will start by saying that the context
Ramona,
that we're living today.
Can I just explain the interpreting first? Just to make sure everybody has access to the interpreting, sorry.
Please.
So just to say, for those who might not have used it before, we have interpreting available. It's at the bottom. There's a small globe icon, and you can just pick your language, English, French, or Spanish. So I'll explain in Spanish just in case you don't have access to it yet. Abajo hay donde puedes cambiar el idioma, puedes hacer clic en el globo y puedes elegir el idioma que quieres escuchar. En français, il y a le mode d'interprétation en bas, c'est un petit globe et vous pouvez choisir la langue que vous voulez écouter. If there is any problems with interpreting or technical problems, please write in the chat and I will fix them.
Thank you so much, Alicia. Is there anything else that we would like to tell to the people before we start? Anything related to technical aspects?
Just to say, you can ask questions about the content in the question and response, the question and answer at the bottom, and the chat will be just for technical issues, and I will close it shortly. But thank you, everybody.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I see here also a question in the chat asking where people can find the recording of the meeting. ECVC and the partners will publish the recording of this session, and we'll make it available on the official channels, on the websites, on the social media. So I hope that's all right with everybody and that's clear. So let's just get into our topic today. I'll start by saying that the context that we're living today is a context of an aggravated crisis that is giving us more than ever before all the reasons in the world to push very hard for peasant rights and for the rights to seeds in particularly, which we consider to be the key to unlock the doors for agroecology and for a pathway to a better world, as we say in the international peasant community, la via campesina. We're living the injustice of a broken food and agriculture system, which is degrading human rights, particularly the rights of migrant seasonal workers. It is a system which is marginalizing and which is criminalizing small peasant farmers. The same system is aggravating and is advancing an industrial agriculture that is destroying our environment, that is generating hunger and malnutrition, particularly we're talking about obesity in our region in Europe, it is a system that is accelerating a corporate agenda for digitalization and for ultra technologization of the farming system, a system that is antisocial, expensive, to the extent that it can really not be justified, and which is ultimately at the cost of the future generations. And in this time of crisis, despite the increasing barriers, we, dozens of millions of peasants in Europe, continue to work our land using our seeds and seed systems to produce healthy, diverse, nutritious, and culturally appropriate food to support our communities and to build local and national economies. We are the agroecological solution to the rising climate crisis. It is us, the small peasant farmers from Europe, who were the first responders and the most effective responders to the needs of our communities, which were and which still are affected by the COVID crisis. Our food and our work has been once again recognized by our fellow citizens as essential, high quality, healthy, which are all attributes that make the difference in these historic times that we're living. And these, once again, have not been recognized by our government and not supported enough. We have to say that we would not be able to do this without our seeds and without our seed systems, because seeds are the basis of agriculture and they're the basis essentially of life. Therefore, we're organizing this webinar to appeal to public EU institutions and to the wider audience to support our work for the benefit of the entire society. We have been working for decades to create instruments that elevate the human rights of peasants and of people working in rural areas, and to fight against the injustice in our food system. The most important result of our work has been the United Nations Declaration for the Rights of Peasants and Other People Working in Rural Areas, which had a very long process of 17 years and which started as a proposal from the international peasant movement, Via Campesina, and was supported by the fisher folks, workers, indigenous peoples from around the world. It is this instrument that we bring to your attention today to find ways together to implement it in our countries and in our region. We have excellent and very experienced speakers who will explain and argue in favor of the right to seeds. And I would be very happy I'm not going to present them. We have a facilitator who will do that, but I will be very happy to hear and to participate further in the exchange. So thank you so much for this part, and looking forward for your questions and answers later.
Thank you, Ramona, and for that great introduction, and welcome to everyone. From me, my name is Catherine Dolan. I work at Arkinoa. For those of you that don't know us, we are a community seed bank based in Austria. We're one of the oldest and the largest community seed banks in Europe, and we have been active for many years now, politically, including in Brussels, working for policies that promote crop diversity rather than discriminate against it, as is the case now. And obviously that work goes hand in hand with work to promote policies that protect and promote peasants and farmers' rights to seeds, because without peasant seed systems, we wouldn't have the crop diversity that still remains with us today. So I'm delighted to be here to facilitate the discussion today. Just a few organizational points again before we move to the presentations. As was mentioned at the beginning, please do write your questions in the question and answer box, which you should be able to see at the bottom of your screen below. And we will take the questions, however, after the 4 speakers. So we will have 4 short inputs today from 4 speakers giving their perspective on the right to seeds in the UNDROP, and particularly how that right could be implemented as part of the upcoming reform of the EU legislation on the marketing of seeds. And after those 4 inputs, we will then go into a discussion. Yeah, please write your questions in the Q&A box, and I will try to collate them and pass them on to the speakers at the end. Because we unfortunately can't see each other in real life, it would be really good if you, when you do write a question, if you could write your name, what country you're in, and if relevant, what organization you are with, so we have a bit more context to who is asking the question. And the chat should be open for a few more minutes if you have any more technical questions regarding interpretation. So without further ado, we'll move to our 4 inputs. Just to the panelists, if you go over 10 minutes, I will give you a polite reminder to bring it to an end. But we're going to begin today with Christophe Collet on the right to seeds in international law. Christophe is from the Geneva Academy of International Human Law and Human Rights and was one of the main organizers of this event and was very involved in the work that led to the UNDROP. So I'll hand over to you, Christophe, to provide your first inputs on the right to seeds.
Thank you very much, Catherine. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today and to organize this event with ECVC. It's also a great pleasure to see that IFOAM is there with Eric and that Arkenoa is there with Catherine and all the networks that you bring, and also the partners that you bring. And it's great to see that we are almost 100 people to discuss the right to seeds in Europe. So as said, I was since at least 10 years, I'm collaborating with Via Campesina, supporting their fight. And in particular, we were very active between 2008 and 2018 during the negotiation of the declaration. And since 2018, I'm trying to push for the implementation with all of you. So today, the focus of my presentation will be on right to seeds and intellectual property rights. We will then have Fulya, Guy, and Eric discussing more specifically on these issues in Europe. So I will give the broader context at the international law. During the negotiation of the declaration, many states of the European Union were against having a declaration at the very beginning, and at the end, most of them abstained. A few of them voted in favor, a few of them voted against. And what we understood in the process was that one of the main issues they had was the right to seeds. And many said that it could be problematic to have a right to seeds for peasants because it could be contradictory with their obligations under international property rights and the treaties that they already ratified in the context of the World Trade Organizations or UPOF. And so that was very clear that it was one of the main challenging Article 19 on the right to seeds of the UNDROP. Now, because of the chair of the negotiation, who was always the ambassador of Bolivia in the UN in Geneva during the whole process, someone who really pushed to have a very progressive text, even if at the end some states would abstain or vote against the declaration. We have a very progressive Article 19 on the right to seeds, and so that's something that we can use today. And so I will very briefly present what we have in the Article 19. But just before doing that, just one word about the voting and the importance of the voting when we lobby states. So the declaration was adopted by 121 states who voted in favor, 8 states against, and 54, I think, abstained. The fact that it has been adopted by a large majority of the General Assembly of the UN means that now all states should implement the declaration. Okay, it's not because you have voted against or because you abstained during the vote during the adoption that you have nothing to do. It was adopted by a majority of the General Assembly, and so that you should implement it in good faith. That's the wording that we use at the UN. Okay, it's like in a national parliament, when it's adopted by a majority, it applies to everyone. the Article 19 of the UNDROP is based on what we had before in international law. So we have human rights treaties, we have the FAO Treaty of 2001, we have the CBD and its protocols. Mainly, that's the main, let's say, basis that we used in defining the right to seats in Article 19. And so in this Article 19, what we have is, for example, the right to maintain, control, protect, and develop their own seats for peasants and traditional knowledge, the right to the recognition of traditional knowledge, innovation, and practices relevant to seats, the right to participate in decision-making on matters relating to seats, the right to participate in benefit sharing for the utilization of seats, the right to save, use, exchange, and sell farm saved seeds and propagating material. And then in the state's obligations, we also have, for each article, we have the rights and then the state's obligation. And one of the most important is in Article 19.6 is the obligation for states to support peasant seeds and peasant seed systems and agro biodiversity. So that's really a strong goal. As in the last 50 years, states mostly supported commercial seeds and industrial food systems. Now the goal in this declaration and the commitment by states is to support peasant seed systems. That's something we can use in the context of the AU discussions on the seed rules. Now, I'm moving now to the discussion between the right to seeds and intellectual property rights, because that's one of the main issues now when we speak about implementation. And what is important to understand when we are dealing with human rights law is that in international law, human rights prevail over other international instruments. That's it's stated in the UN Charter. It states that in the UN Charter, one of the main objectives of the UN is to promote and protect human rights. And then it says that if there is a contradiction between the obligation of the states under the Charter and another obligation, the obligation under the Charter prevails. Okay, so that's something we use to say that human rights prevail over international intellectual property rights. And this idea or this principle is very much present in the declaration that was adopted in 2018, at least in 3 articles. Article 2.4, which says that states should interpret, elaborate, interpret, apply international instruments in accordance with the rights of peasants. 15.5, in which it says that states should adapt their policies so that they respond to the respect and the rights of peasants. And Article 19.8, which is very important for us today and for the discussion on the rights of seeds in Europe. So I will just write the end of the, I will write the Article 19.a. States should ensure that seed policies, plant variety protection, and other intellectual property laws, certification schemes, and seed marketing laws respect and take into account the rights, needs, and realities of peasants and other people working in rural areas. So that's really the idea that national and regional laws and policies should be adapted to meet the needs and the rights of peasants on the right to seeds. And so that's very explicit in the Article 19.8. And so that's really something that we can use. It's not only international law, in international in general, it's also very explicitly said in 3 articles of the declaration. So now let me end by saying where we can act to promote the right to seeds at which level. At the national level, at the regional level, of course, so using this declaration, but also at the global level. And we see some opportunities with the discussion on farmers' rights in the Plant Treaty, and also with, for example, the discussion on how free trade agreements are promoting the UPOF 91 regulations in countries from the South, and how we can use the declaration to say that the states of the North should stop requiring countries from the South to adopt UPOF as one of the preconditions for negotiating free trade agreements with them. We have done a huge study and lobby work in Switzerland, so it's the beginning of a long journey in Switzerland, but we really try to put to lobby Switzerland so that it stops asking countries of the South to adopt UPOF when it enters into a negotiation of a free trade agreements. And in this discussion, UNDROP was very useful. So we have a coalition on seats in Switzerland. We also have a coalitions of the Friends of the Declaration in Switzerland. So we use that. Members of La Via Campesina are in the coalition with development organizations and human rights organizations. So that's an experience we can share from Switzerland, and maybe this experience should be also discussed at the EU level, and to discuss how the EU should not only implement the right to seats in Europe, but also in its foreign policy. That's it for the start. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christoph, for putting the Article 19 into context and also giving us some first ideas on how we might be able to use it in very specific areas to push for better laws. I'm going to move on now to Fulia Bator. She's going to talk to us about UNDROP's contribution to European farmers' rights to seeds. We were honoured to have Fulia working with us at Arkanoa for many years in Brussels, and now she is independent with her own consultancy called Kaibele. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. And Fulia, I will hand over to you for a bit more of a European focus.
Thank you. I hope you can. Okay. Glitch. I think this works. Right?
Now it works. Yeah, perfect.
Yes. Thank you very much, Catherine, for the introduction. Yeah, the Kibele is, it's pronounced Kibele for those who have a bit of Turkish Anatolian side. You know, it's basically the ancestor of Artemis in Turkey in the Anatolian plateau. So I'm very happy to be here to talk about the UNDROP's contributions to European farmers' rights to seeds. And without further ado, because we only have 10 minutes, I will just talk about the two main big contributions, I think, that the declaration has in the European context. First, it's the holistic approach to farmers' rights to seeds that you have in the declaration. You have a holistic approach on peasants' rights in the entire declaration. So it covers very different types of human rights given to that peasants have. So the right to land, the right to water. But I think we can easily argue that that holistic approach also applies to the right to seeds within the declaration. So it is beyond farm safe seed. When someone in the European bubble or in the European context talks about farmers' rights, it's usually about farm safe seed because that's how they're used to approach the subject. Whereas the declaration actually sets it black and white that it's much more than that. And then second part that Christoph has already talked about a bit is the strong state obligations that accompany those rights to seeds. So I'm going to quickly go to the different elements you see in the holistic approach. So the first element is the more traditional, so the ones that we're used to seeing. Usually when you talk about farmers' rights, is the right to save, use, exchange, and sell seeds. Okay, and this has implications in different policy fields in the EU level, at the EU level, which is intellectual property rights. So as mentioned by Christoph, but it's not just about the farmer's privilege in plant variety protection or in patents. It's also about the scope of patentability, the idea of also having perhaps means to protect, you know, the farmers' varieties. Then seed marketing laws basically have to allow, and without creating too much burden, the right to save, use, exchange, sell their own seeds, so access to the market, but also I think an element of protection and safeguarding of the peasant seed system outside of the seed marketing realm. Then plant health laws. The second element you have in the holistic approach is a right to maintain, control, protect, and develop their own seeds, which is something that usually when European lawmakers, whether at national, regional, or European level, don't necessarily think about. So having that element in the United Nations Declaration is extremely important. And then you have, so this basically touches upon the intellectual property rights regime, again, having so access to some kind of protection, and perhaps playing on the concept of novelty, where if a third party is asking for protection, whether it's patent or plant variety rights, that actually peasants' knowledge and peasant seeds are taken into account, where that novelty is assessed, just as an example, but also in the rights and the scope of protection that is granted by a patent, for instance. You cannot encroach too much on peasant systems. And then biosafety regulation, so really having control over contamination, etc., over your own, so the seed system. Then the right to protect traditional knowledge and ensuring equitable sharing of benefits. This is also quite, I think, spectacular in the declaration, because traditional knowledge, especially when you read the transposition and the implementation of the Nagoya Protocol in Europe, traditional knowledge is only held within indigenous communities. They never ever make the link between traditional knowledge and innovation and peasant communities or other people living in rural areas. So having this is an extremely important tool, and advocacy, and it's a great conversation starter. And then you'll see it's actually a lobbying tool, because you have state obligations to actually fulfill these things. And so the right to protect traditional knowledge of peasants has implications on intellectual property rights. So you can ask for a disclosure, for instance, of origin of when someone asks for a patent or a plant variety protection, and also on the implementation of the Biodiversity Convention and everything that relates to access and benefit sharing, so Nagoya Protocol obligations. Okay, so recognizing the fact that peasant communities hold traditional knowledge, and that as a result, they have to be consulted. And when someone accesses their knowledge and their resource, the benefits arising from the use of that knowledge or the resource needs to be shared with them, not the state. Okay. That's a very important point. Then a fourth part of the holistic approach is the right to participate in decision making. So this touches upon consultation, the better regulation package, for instance, in the EU. Does it really work? Do peasants organizations have a real seat at the table? And then do they have capacity? So can they, do they have structural funding from the state to actually participate really in these discussions? And then all of these, so I'm basically taking back all of the legislation and policy fields that are impacted by the right to seeds. And these are sorted by strong state obligations. This is actually a great contribution of the declaration. So the idea is that states need to ensure consistency of all of the international agreements they sign in all of these policy fields. And then at regional and national level. So everything, they just need to have this in mind. So when they sign a free trade agreement, but also when they go to Cartagena on biosafety, they have to have this, and also at national level, when even urban planning, except every single policy field that they're involved in, they have to take this into account, the declaration and the rights of peasants to seeds. And then there's an obligation to respect, protect, and fulfill the right to seeds. So an obligation to respect, it's avoid creating obstacles and taking into account the needs and realities of peasants. So for instance, in seed marketing laws, that means that peasants need to have the right to save and exchange their seeds without having too many hurdles. Same with plant health regulation. So it can't be disproportionate, and it needs to take into account the needs on the ground. And then the idea of protecting is that non-state actors need to respect also the rights to seeds of peasants. So for instance, this is on biosafety. It's pretty, I think, straightforward. So the precautionary principle really needs to be applied. So the institutions in the state need to make sure that the precautionary principle is applied, so that the right of peasants to seeds is protected. And then the states need to fulfill the right to seeds. So it means they need to, as an example, strengthen the access to peasant seeds. So that means having facilitated access within seed marketing laws, but also perhaps acting on other policies, such as the Common Agricultural Policy, which is coming right up, with a third obligation from the states, which is the idea that they need to support in general, the peasant seed system and promote the use of peasant seeds and agrobiodiversity. And this is obviously done also in the framework discussion of the agricultural policy. So the right to seeds goes way beyond farm-saved seed, which I think is the greatest contribution that the declaration has. And then ensuring participation to decision-making processes. So I've touched upon this. This is a structural, I think, and a mindset change that needs to happen. And last but not least, in the state obligations, ensuring that agricultural research and development integrate the needs of peasants with their active participation. So it means looking a bit at their research policy and checking, for instance, how much of their budget is actually going to the support of industrial seed and agricultural system. How many projects does the European Commission and the Horizon projects finance in genetic modification, and how many do they actually really finance for participatory plant breeding and agrobiodiversity? I assure you it's not equal. So the road is long, but the road I think is quite complete, and the declaration provides a great and very soothing landscape, even though the battle is, I think, more complicated than what you see here. And I'm very much looking forward to the discussions we have today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fulia. That was really helpful to show how wide the consequences can be of the UNDROP and all of the different policy areas that it touches. It's not just about farm-saved seeds or seed marketing. You say it has, as you say, it has a very, very broad consequences. Just a quick reminder from the translators, if the speakers could try to speak slowly, they would find that helpful. I am included in that, I think. We're moving on to our next speaker now, which is Guy Kassler from the Seeds Working Group of the European Coordination Via Campesina. Guy obviously has extensive experience working on these issues and is now going to talk to us about what changes are needed in the EU specifically to comply with the UNDROP. I think Guy will talk in French, so for those of you listening in the general room, you will need to turn on translation if you need it. You should be able to find it down below. There's a little globe sign where you can turn on the language that you need if you need it translated into English. So Guy, I will hand over to you.
Oui, bonjour à toutes et bonjour à tous. Je présenterai un petit peu le point de vue de la coordination européenne via Campesina et aussi par l'expérience que j'ai eue de participer aux discussions pour l'élaboration de cette déclaration à l'ONU. Les systèmes semenciers paysans en Europe comme ailleurs sont nés avec l'agriculture. Ces systèmes ils consistent à sélectionner et produire les semences et les plants en les prélevant dans la récolte ou dans les plantations de la production agricole, à laquelle ces semences et ces plants sont destinés. Les échanges réguliers de petites quantités de semences entre paysans de différentes régions permettent de renouveler la diversité des semences utilisées, qui restent toujours majoritairement produites localement. Ce n'est qu'ainsi que les semences paysannes s'adaptent en permanence à chaque condition de production particulière et à ses évolutions. Un nouveau système semencier est né il y a environ 2 siècles, en Europe d'ailleurs, le système semencier industriel qui a séparé la production agricole de sa reproduction, donc de la production des semences. De producteur de ses propres semences, le paysan devient dans ce système industriel un simple consommateur de semences produites par l'industrie. Les obtenteurs de semences industrielles ont épuré, ont croisé et sélectionné des semences paysannes pour créer de nouvelles variétés élites en dehors des champs des paysans, dans des stations expérimentales, dans des laboratoires et désormais dans des ordinateurs qui travaillent uniquement avec des informations génétiques numérisées. Ces obtenteurs les multiplient ensuite dans des parcelles dédiées qui sont séparées des parcelles de la production agricole. Ces semences élites industrielles ne sont pas adaptées à l'immense diversité des conditions de culture, mais aux intrants chimiques qui gonflent leur rendement au détriment de la santé et de l'environnement. Elles ne peuvent être cultivées qu'en standardisant et en adaptant partout cette diversité des conditions de culture avec ces intrants chimiques. La réglementation européenne actuelle concernant la commercialisation des semences n'a été conçue que pour les systèmes semenciers industriels. Les systèmes semenciers paysans n'y trouvent pas leur place. La nouvelle réglementation en cours de discussion actuellement doit prendre en compte les systèmes semenciers paysans tout autant que les systèmes semenciers industriels. Tout comme la réglementation des semences industrielles repose sur les droits de propriété industrielle des obtenteurs, la réglementation des semences paysannes doit reposer sur les droits des paysans reconnus à l'article 19 de la Déclaration de l'ONU. Ces droits permettent de définir ce que sont les semences paysannes. Un produit fermier, par exemple, n'est pas défini par sa composition ou par son aspect, mais par le fait qu'il est issu de la transformation de la production de la ferme par le paysan qui a produit cette production selon des procédés fermiers et non avec des procédés industriels. Il en est de même des semences paysannes qui sont définies par le fait qu'elles sont produites par des paysans dans leur champ de production agricole avec des procédés paysans et des ressources génétiques paysannes et non dans des parcelles spécialisées de multiplication de semences sous contrat pour des semenciers industriels. Les paysans européens sont tout autant consommateurs de semences industrielles que producteurs de leurs propres semences. C'est pourquoi la coordination européenne Via Campesina présente des propositions réglementaires différentes pour chacun de ces deux systèmes semenciers. Je ne pourrai pas les détailler toutes, je vais présenter les principales. Pour les systèmes semenciers industriels, un élargissement de la diversité de l'offre commerciale est indispensable. Une généralisation à l'agriculture conventionnelle des ouvertures déjà acquises pour la réglementation biologique, par exemple le matériel hétérogène aussi, Erigal présentera, je pense, ces ouvertures. La protection des savoirs traditionnels et donc le droit de cultiver sans OGM et la protection contre la biopiraterie impliquent trois obligations. Une obligation d'information sur les techniques d'obtention, de sélection et de multiplication de toutes les semences commerciales et des ressources génétiques qui ont été utilisées par les obtenteurs. Que ces semences soient OGM ou non, on a besoin de cette information. Deuxièmement, une obligation d'information sur tout droit de propriété industrielle qui couvre les semences commercialisées. Et enfin, l'interdiction d'identifier une variété commerciale avec la dénomination de semences traditionnelles, locales, paysannes, qui sont toutes composées de nombreux écotypes, pour la plupart différents de celui qui est accepté à l'enregistrement lorsqu'on veut commercialiser des semences. Pour les systèmes semenciers paysans, la coordination européenne Via Campesina demande une application stricte des droits des paysans tels que définis à l'article 19 de la Déclaration de l'ONU. Les paysans qui utilisent, échangent ou vendent leurs propres semences paysannes ne doivent pas être considérés comme des opérateurs professionnels des diverses réglementations des semences industrielles qui ont été présentées par Foulia. Je donnerai deux exemples intéressants de lois italiennes et françaises qui concernent les échanges de semences entre agriculteurs. En Italie, la réutilisation des semences par les agriculteurs ou l'échange d'une partie de la récolte effectuée par les agriculteurs ne sont pas considérés comme de la commercialisation. Donc, la réglementation sur la commercialisation des semences ne s'applique pas. Les échanges en France, les échanges entre agriculteurs de semences ou de plants n'appartenant pas à une variété protégée par un droit d'obtention végétale et produite sur une exploitation hors de contrat de multiplication de semences pour l'industrie, ces échanges sont considérés comme relevant de l'entraide. L'entraide est réalisée entre agriculteurs par des échanges de services en travail ou en moyens de production. Elle est un contrat à titre gratuit, même lorsque le bénéficiaire rembourse au prestataire tout ou partie des frais engagés par ce dernier. Concrètement, cela veut dire que la réglementation du catalogue ne s'applique pas aux échanges de semences entre agriculteurs, y compris à titre onéreux. Les agriculteurs qui utilisent, échangent et vendent leurs propres semences doivent aussi être soumis aux règles sanitaires de la production agricole et non aux règles sanitaires beaucoup plus strictes, adaptées à la production de semences industrielles. La protection d'un brevet ne doit pas s'appliquer en cas de présence fortuite ou accidentelle de semences brevetées dans des semences paysannes. C'est le cas en cas de contamination, notamment par des semences OGM. La protection d'un brevet sur un gène, matière biologique ou sur une information de génétique ne doit pas s'étendre aux semences issues exclusivement de procédés essentiellement biologiques d'obtention, qu'elles soient paysannes ou commerciales d'ailleurs, y compris si elles contiennent les mêmes gènes, les mêmes matières biologiques ou les mêmes informations génétiques brevetées. Enfin, le droit d'obtention végétale de l'UPOF ne doit s'étendre qu'à la commercialisation de matériel de reproduction de la variété protégée et non à son utilisation ou sa réutilisation par les agriculteurs. C'était le cas avec l'UPOF de 1961 ou 1978 et nous devons pouvoir réutiliser ces deux conventions. Voilà, je reste disponible pour plus de détails et vos questions. Merci.
Thank you very much, Guy, for sharing with us some of the views of the European Coordination Via Campesina of how the UNDROP should work in practice to really guarantee peasants' rights to seeds. For our last speaker now, we're going to hand over to Eric Gall, Deputy Director of IFOM, who is going to talk to us about some of the recent changes with regard to organic seeds in the organic regulation, which will come into force next year. So over to you, Eric.
Thank you very much, Catherine. It's a pleasure to be here, and I would like to thank Arkenoa, European Coordination Via Campesina, and the Geneva Academy for organizing this important discussion, because indeed in the background we have an upcoming revision of a whole European seed legislation as well. So indeed I represent the European Federation of Organic Farming, so it's organic farmers, but also processors, certifiers, breeders, of course. And I mean, you all know what organic farming is about, but you know that the use of GMOs is banned from organic production. The organic movement has taken a clear stance that new genetic engineering techniques are indeed GMOs and should continue not to be used in organic farming. I think it's important to remind this today because it's an important ongoing fight at the European level and in many member states, you know, the need for regulation and transparency on the use of such new genetic engineering techniques. And the organic movement is also, of course, opposed to all forms of patents on seeds and on genetic information as well. So Organic is related at the European level. It was not always the case. It's the case since the 90s. There were various reforms of the organic regulation, and I must say, there are benefits about being regulated at the European level. It gives you an official recognition. It makes organic farmers eligible to some form of CAP support for conversion or maintenance in certain countries, but it also have problems of being regulated, because then you're not the organic movement itself is not only in control of its own standards. You have to negotiate with the policymakers themselves, and that partly explains why the last revision of the organic regulation was a long and painful process. Let's say, I think it was launched by the European Commission in 2012. And they only concluded the negotiations in 2018, 6 years later. And I think it was the longest trilogue negotiations, between the three European institutions in the whole history of the EU, I was told. But we have a new regulation since 2018, and it's supposed to enter into force in 2022. The entry into force was postponed by 1 year because precisely there are still ongoing negotiations between the Commission and the member states on technical legislation like implementing act or delegated act. But basically, one of the key added value of this new European regulation is about seeds, precisely. And to be fair, I must say that this is largely due to the efforts of the European Parliament in these difficult negotiations, and in particular of a rapporteur, Martin Häusling, who is a member of the Green Party, and who was the rapporteur for the Parliament for this review of the organic regulation, of his team and his advisors as well, because I think it was a topic for tough negotiations between the Parliament and the member states until the last minute in this revision process. So what are the new provisions in the organic regulations? Well, first of all, the background is that in theory, all organic farmers should use organic seeds. But the problem is that there's not enough organic seeds available, basically, not enough production of organic seeds. So there are many derogations possible for organic farmers, too many derogation. It depends in the country and on the crops. It's not the topic of today, but basically that's the rule. So, and if you use an organic seed, of course, it has to be a seed like for almost every other seeds that has to be on the European seed catalog. But the provisions of a new organic regulations, if I simplify a bit, introduce three new important possibilities. First of all, the use of farm-safe seeds is explicitly allowed. And that's the first important step. It might sound like a no-brainer, but actually, when organic farmers are controlled as part of a certification, normally they have to prove that they have bought organic certified seeds. So the fact that the legislation now explicitly recognizes this right to use farm-safe seeds is an important step forward. And an organic farmer will be able to use his or her own seeds without risking losing his organic certification, basically. So that's the first modification. Another modification is the possibility for organic farmers to use organic heterogeneous material. So what is this? I think the first way to define it is that organic heterogeneous material is not a variety in the legal sense. So it can be a plant reproductive material which does not meet the criteria for a seed variety and which is not on the European seed catalog. So this opens up in theory, a whole new range of possibilities for farmers to use, land races, populations, mixtures of different populations as well. And there are still at the moment ongoing negotiations on how to precisely define it between the Commission and member states. But according to us, organic heterogeneous materials will be bred and developed under organic conditions. it should have a high level of phenotypic and genotypic diversity as well, and it should be an evolving material able to adapt to growing conditions and to stresses due to natural or human selection. So it changes over time. Another important difference compared to varieties in the legal sense, and I'm sure Fulia could add to that as she was involved in the discussion, I think, is that the use of such heterogeneous material will be possible with only a notification, meaning that there will be no need once again to get it registered on the national and European seed catalog as well. So that's the second novelty. And the third novelty of a new organic regulation is the recognition of a new category called organic varieties, or varieties suitable for organic production. And here, there won't be a legal text right away. It will be the subject first of a so-called temporary experiment, because contrary to the heterogeneous material, organic variety will have to comply with a definition, with a legal definition of a variety. But like Guy explains, you know, the criteria to put a variety on the European seed catalog are basically the criteria of industrial agriculture, you know, distinctivity, uniformity, and stability. So there will be a need to discuss how to change or to adapt this legal criteria, especially on uniformity and stability, to grant more access to more diverse genetic material as well. And according to the new organic regulation, organic varieties should be the result of organic breeding programs, activities, and shall focus on enhancement of genetic diversity, the reliance on natural reproductive ability. So we're talking a lot about open pollinated variety here, and as well as agronomic performance, disease resistance, adaptation to diverse local soil and climate conditions. So basically they should result from program adapted to so-called low input condition, organic conditions. So to conditions which does not necessitate a use of fertilizer or pesticides as well. So I think I will stop here for the introduction of these new provisions. Once again, they will only apply from a legal point of view on the 1st of January 2022, but these are important steps forward. And I think one of the things at stake with the upcoming review of the European seed legislation is that we do not lose, first of all, you know, what has been gained in this review of the organic regulation in terms of new opportunities for farmers to cultivate more diverse genetic material. That would be an important point as well. And maybe one last word. I mean, Fulia mentioned the importance of you know, research to develop a plant breeding in line with the principle of organic and with the principle of agroecology. But to be fair, in my experience, I think some people inside the European Commission in the research department were quite key already 10, 15 years ago, were quite keen to promote participatory plant breeding approaches. And at the time, there was more openness in some people working at the European level than at the national level, you know, to support this kind of approaches and participatory research approaches between peasants and researchers as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric, for that introduction. And I think it's really motivating for us to hear as we embark on a new reform of the seed legislation that there are some positive developments on which we can hopefully build as we go into the new reform, also taking on board the new opportunities that UNDROP creates. So thank you again to all the speakers for their input and their insights. We now have just under half an hour for questions and discussion. Once again, you can write your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom. There is also the option, if you wish to ask your question in person, that you write in the chat box you would like to do so, and the technical team can turn on your video and your microphone, but you need to let us know first that you would like to ask a question so we can give you permission to turn on your video and your microphone. But please be aware that if you do turn on your video and your microphone, that the session is being recorded and will also be published, so that by requesting to do so, you're giving your permission that your video will be recorded as part of the recording of the session. But there are already a couple of questions in for the participants. The first one is from Frederic from InfoGM regarding the timetable for the form of the seed legislation, if we know anything already about what the timetable looks like. I wonder who would like to take that, maybe Fulia?
I can take that, and then people, others can build on it. The timetable is unclear. What I can tell you that we know with certainty is that it all started in November 2019. The year has been long, so it's I'm mixing up years. It's weird. So it started in November 2019. The European Council asked the European Commission to come up with a study on options to reform the seed marketing legislation. So it's not a given. I think we know by now that a reform is coming, but the study has taken a lot of, normally it should have been published in December 2020, but it has taken a lot of time because of the commission workload plus COVID, etc. So they got the consultancy contracted, which is ICF Consulting, a big group, has been giving more time to do it. So we think that the study now is complete, that it's in the hands of the Commission. They are supposed to publish it soon. We don't know yet. I think the date we have is by April of this year, and we've been promised, I think, that the study will be published, will be public, and there will be opportunities to comment on it. What we don't know for sure, I think, is that whether that study will be accompanied by formal options for the reform, by an impact assessment, we don't know. I highly doubt that it will be accompanied by a real reform proposal. If it comes with something, it will come with formal options for reform, but it will not come with a real proposal, right? The proposal, I think, will come later into the year. And how much time that will take depends on how much they are willing to take the political risk of using the former impact assessment of 2013, and how much they're actually wanting to take the political risk again of using the former proposal, the regulation proposal. So, but it will be, something will come in April this year, and text probably by the end of the year, I would say.
Thanks. Eric or Guy, do you want to add anything on that? Okay, I think it's interesting as well. The Commission will also be publishing a study in April on the regulation of the new genetic engineering techniques, and it will be interesting to see whether they try to combine the two packages or keep them separate.
Can I just say a word? Sorry.
Sorry, Christoph, I didn't ask
yes.
you. I didn't think it was your...
No, just to say that it's not only about the content of the future regulation, that of course is extremely important, but it's also the process. And in the declaration, one of the key right is the right to participation of peasant organizations. And I think that it's also important to see how peasant organizations are consulted during this process, and how I think they have not really been consulted in the as of now, but how they will be consulted in the future is also important. And then there was a question in the chat if there is a yes, we had scheduled some time to have a reaction by parliamentarians of the European Union, of the European Parliament, but I know we have some members of the team of the parliamentarians, but not parliamentarians. But if I'm wrong, it's time, yes, for parliamentarians to speak. It's Anna Vieira who asked the question. I don't know if she's working with one of them or if she just saw that in the program.
Perhaps if someone is here from the European Parliament, they can write it in the chat, and we can add that in to have the reactions from the side of the European Parliament. For now, I would move on to the next question from Patrick Mulvaney. UNDROP recognises patents' collective rights to resources. Does this extend to seeds and agricultural biodiversity, even if it is not explicitly emphasised in Articles 19 and 20? I think maybe Christoph, if you would like to.
Yes, just the question of the collective rights and in the whole process of the negotiation of the declaration was quite difficult. Many states were against the declaration, because they were saying they didn't want to recognize new collective rights. So that was in some of the drafts, we had an Article 3 in which it was said that all the rights can be exercised individually and collectively, and that was very explicit, and that was deleted. Then the decision was made to put explicitly collective and individual when it is most relevant, and that's, as you said, one example is Article 17 on the right to land, in which it is very clearly explicitly recognized that it can be exercised individually and or collectively. But I think that we can still use the definition of peasants in Article 1 to say that this collective dimension could apply to all the rights, because in Article 1, in the definition of peasants, it says that it's a person who engages or who seeks to engage alone or in association with others or as a community. So if the definition of the subject, it can be a person, an association, or a community, we can I think interpret that saying that the rights can be exercised by a community. And I think that there is some Sandra Pereira is there.
Indeed, no, we have a member of the European Parliament from Portugal with us, Sandra Pereira. I think the team has turned on. Hello, welcome.
Hello, sorry, I raised the hand because I think it was in the program that there was some time for maps to participate. I am from Portugal. I'm not in the Agri committee, but I am the map that is following agriculture in my delegation. I'm from the Portuguese Communist Party, and I will be very, very brief. I just want to say that when first of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation and welcome the initiative and the different insights and inputs that were given. And when we discussed this and vote the European Commission proposal for a regulation on production and making available of plant reproductive material on the market, the so-called seed law, the Portuguese Communist Party defended and proposed that it should be rejected and asked the Commission to withdraw its proposal, and that was what happened. Now, at this moment, I just want to say that we, the Portuguese Communist Party members of Parliament, are committed to fight for the same values and principles that guided our performance in all decision-making process that influence seed availability and access to all. We know quite well that the fight continues, goes on as long as there are patents and other rights to produce and commerce life in hands of large corporations, as long as there are free trade agreements that promote the entry of genetically modified products or agricultural products produced on a huge scale, which in addition to jeopardizing the health of people and their rights in countries of origins, compete with locally produced ones in European Union member states. The struggle also goes on as long as there is no common agricultural policy that defends the right to produce for small farmers and their just remunerations, a truly sustainable agriculture model, very different from the interests of multinationals and agro-industry. In short, that guarantees food sovereignty to state members. That was my participation, and that's what I wanted to say. I had some more things to say, but I know that we don't have time. So next time, we thank you for this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, for the contribution, and it's great to have you here representing the European Parliament. As we heard from Eric, the European Parliament has really played a role in moving the seed legislation forward, and I think you will be one of our most important partners as we as a community embark on the next reform to really improve the conditions for crop diversity, for seed diversity, and for implementing the right to seed. So thank you very much, and apologies, we had this small oversight there. Christophe?
Just to,
Are you still
just to say that Portugal was one of the only countries of the European Union who voted in favor of the declaration, and they were very supportive during the whole process. So I think that the Portugal position on the declaration could also be used in this context of the negotiation of the seed regulations.
Thank you. Christophe, there are a couple of questions as well on using now the UNDROP. There's one around, there's a question, is there documentation that we can use to argue about the obligations of states? So how can we make states aware of their obligations under the UNDROP? There's also a question if states' obligations only extend to peasants within their own territories, or whether they have an obligation to promote these rights to peasants in other countries as well.
Okay, so I can, in the chat, I can send some link to a publication that is available in the 3 languages of the webinar, in French, Spanish, and English, on the implementation of the declaration and the state's obligations. That what is important is that to understand that it's quite unique, because at some point in the first draft we only had the rights proclaimed, but without any state's obligation defined. And there was a decision made in the half of the negotiation to include the obligations, and now it's really longer, and it's more precise what states should be doing. And so it's not only in Article 2 in states obligations, but also in every article you have the right and then the state's obligation. So that's very detailed what we can ask to states on the basis of the declaration. Then on the extraterritorial obligations, we had a discussion on that, and again in one of the drafts it was explicitly said territorially and extraterritorially. Some states didn't want that, and that was a compromise that was made, so it's not anymore there. But the fact is that the fact that it is that, for example, the fact that states should respect, protect, and fulfill the rights of peasants is a typology of obligation we use since 20 years in the UN, and it means they should do it nationally and also internationally. It doesn't stop to there is no limits that are explicit regarding the territory of the state, so we can interpret again that in a progressive manner. What is important to know is that in Article 2.6, it's a very detailed Article 2.6 on the commitment to international cooperation and assistance to promote the rights of peasants. So there is a very detailed Article 2.6, which means that the states they committed to cooperate. So meaning to also have not having a negative impact and having a positive impact on the rights of peasants in other countries. So that's an argument again we can use. So it's quite clear that yes, there is an obligation of international cooperation in the declaration.
Thank you. Eric, there were a couple of questions on the provisions in the organic regulation. There is a question if the right to use farm-safe seeds also extends to farm-safe seedlings. And also a question just to clarify if organic farmers are required to use organic seeds for all species. And I would also add in a question, I would be interested, to what extent do you think the provisions in the organic regulation will really help to increase the availability of organic seeds for farmers? what additional measures might be necessary to do so.
Okay, thank you. On the first question about seedlings, I must admit my ignorance and my insufficient level of knowledge, but I saw some of our organic breeders are participating to this conference, so maybe they could provide an answer through the chat to this specific question. Yes, organic farmers, according to the regulation, have an obligation to use organic seeds. That's the principle. But in practice, they are also allowed to ask for derogation in case of insufficient availability of organic seeds. And well, to make a long story short, let's say that in many countries, it's very easy to get derogations. And for certain crops, you know, there are almost no organic seeds being used as well. So, you know, to really improve the situation, first we need to phase out derogations, and the new organic regulation gives an end date when derogations will not be possible at all. 2036 might sound like a long time, but it's important to have a real end date so as to really, you know, incentivize breeders to produce organic seeds as well. That's the first thing. And in some countries, there are already some interesting mechanisms implemented only at the national level to gradually phase out derogations. Like in France, I know, you know, there is a so-called expert group which gathers, you know, organic farmers organization, breeders, regulators, and they agree every year for which kind of crops there is enough availability of organic seeds in quantity, but also in terms of diversity of varieties available. And for these ones, no derogation should be possible anymore. And there is, of course, a need to invest more in organic plant breeding as well. So there's a lot that should be done to increase the availability of organic seeds. And I think the last question was about, can you remind me, please?
There was the question about the seedlings, the question about whether the provisions in the organic regulation will contribute to an increase in the availability of organic seeds. And I think you answered all of them.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, hopefully the new provisions will contribute to more availability. I mean, of course, farm safe seeds already, and through the heterogeneous material. But it's hard to assess in advance to what extent there will be, you know, availability of this heterogeneous material, which is a new legal category from the start. But yes, I mean, the possibility from a legal point of view for organic farmers to access more diverse genetic material should indeed improve the availability of organic seeds. Thank you.
Fulia, I think you wanted to add something on those questions.
It's just on the seedling. I copy pasted the provisions of the organic regulation. I'm just gonna put them in the chat. So, but the answer is yes, because it just refers to all plant reproductive material, which means plants, you know, parts of plants. So it includes seedlings for the possibility to use farm-saved seeds in organic.
Thank you. There are a couple of further questions in the chat that I would like to ask to Guy. There is a question from Susanna from the German umbrella organization of seed savers. What would be the pros and cons about including GMO in seed marketing? That's quite a big question. And also a question from Claire O'Grady Walsh about how we can use the UNDROP, or how we can promote the UNDROP more at an international level and also in universities and international development programs. So how can we promote awareness of this new framework and these new possibilities at the international level? And if Guy, you would like to say a few words on those.
Oui, les OGM sont par nature contraires aux droits des paysans, pour deux raisons très simples. La première, c'est qu'ils sont tous brevetés et que donc ces brevets interdisent aux paysans de réutiliser leurs propres semences, de les échanger et de les vendre. Mais en plus, ces OGM peuvent contaminer les semences paysannes ou aussi les semences traditionnelles. Et à l'heure actuelle, le droit européen n'empêche pas le brevet de s'appliquer à des semences qui sont contaminées. En France, on a fait voter une loi qui dit que le brevet ne s'applique pas en cas de présence fortuite ou accidentelle de semences brevetées dans un lot de semences, mais ce n'est pas encore le cas en Europe et il faut étendre ça à toute la législation européenne. De la même manière, je l'ai évoqué tout à l'heure, les brevets maintenant sont déposés sur des gènes ou des informations génétiques et pas sur des variétés. Et ils sont déposés sur des informations génétiques, par exemple la résistance d'une plante à un champignon ou à un insecte, qui peuvent très bien exister dans des semences paysannes ou des semences traditionnelles. Et aujourd'hui, ces brevets qui sont accordés parce qu'il y a eu une technique OGM qui a été utilisée, une technique microbiologique, ces brevets peuvent s'étendre à toutes les semences paysannes ou traditionnelles qui contiennent l'information génétique qui est brevetée. Donc ça, c'est la première raison pour laquelle les OGM sont incompatibles avec les semences paysannes. La deuxième raison, c'est qu'avec ce mécanisme de brevet, aujourd'hui, on assiste à une concentration énorme de l'industrie semencière entre les mains de moins de 10 sociétés transnationales qui rachètent toutes les autres sociétés parce que les autres semenciers sont obligés d'utiliser leurs techniques brevetées. Et donc aujourd'hui, ces quelques sociétés transnationales contrôlent près de 60% du marché mondial des semences, ce qui génère une diminution énorme de la diversité des semences disponibles sur le marché. Et enfin, ces OGM sont contraires tout simplement aux droits de tous les citoyens parce que ces techniques mettent sur le marché et disséminent dans l'environnement des semences qui peuvent être très dangereuses pour la santé et pour l'environnement. On l'a déjà vu avec les variétés tolérantes aux herbicides ou celles qui tuent les insectes. Et donc, à l'heure actuelle, nous sommes, nous, à la Via Campesina Europe, complètement opposés à ces OGM. Aujourd'hui, il y a une offensive de l'industrie semencière pour ne pas réglementer tous les nouveaux OGM qu'ils produisent, ceux qui sont obtenus par des nouvelles techniques, autres que la transgénèse, qui aujourd'hui est une vieille technique OGM. Il est clair que si on laisse faire l'industrie, et beaucoup de pays voudraient suivre cette proposition de l'industrie, ben, tout simplement l'agriculture paysanne, mais aussi l'agriculture biologique ne seront plus possibles parce qu'on aura des OGM partout, ils ne seront pas identifiés, ils ne seront pas évalués et toutes les semences disponibles seront brevetées. Donc il est très important de s'opposer aux OGM en général et surtout de s'opposer à cette volonté de déréglementer tous les nouveaux OGM.
Thank you very much. We're running out of time now for the questions. Christophe, did you want to?
No, just that there was a question you asked on what can we do at international level, and so I think now it was also discussed with Via Campesina what is the most important thing to obtain, and I think the thing for which we will fight is to have a special rapporteur of the United Nations on the rights of peasants. It exists for the right to food, it exists for the rights of indigenous peoples, and so it should exist for the rights of peasants. And it would mean one expert of the UN mandated, independent experts mandated to promote the declaration, to receive complaints of violations, etc., to do country missions in many countries in the world. So that would be a great achievement. And for that to happen, we need a new resolution at the Human Rights Council. It could happen this year. And when this resolution will be negotiated, it will be important to have to do lobbying on the EU states, so that this time they support the resolution and not abstain or vote against. Just there was a question also in the chat on the possibility for the European Court on Human Rights to include the declaration. Yes, why not? Knowing that the European Court is only mandated to protect civil and political rights, but we had already some decisions at the UN level with the Human Rights Committee in the Inter-American system with the Inter-American Court on Human Rights, in which they have these regional and international bodies use the declaration to protect. In the two cases, it was the right to land. But yes, so why not having the European Court one day using the declaration? And the last question it's about if the EU could introduce the declaration in its national or regional laws. I'm not sure, given the political support in the EU to this declaration when it was adopted. But again, the support should be built, and we should lobby states so that in the future they support the declaration at the international and also at the regional level.
Thank you, Christophe, for covering those points. We've run out of time for further questions, so apologies to those participants whose question was maybe not answered. Just before we hand over to Antonio for the concluding remarks, I'd just like to invite the other three speakers just to maybe in one or two sentences say what their hopes are now for the implementation of the UNDROP in the context of the reform of the European seed marketing legislation. What would you like to see happen now in the next few months? First, Fulia, I'll hand over to you.
Okay, thank you for the big bullet. I think what needs to happen definitely is that peasant seed systems that are built around the saving, exchanging, and using of their own seed systems are considered to be completely outside of seed marketing laws, which have been designed for industrial agriculture, and it cannot encroach on that reality like it does in certain countries like Estonia, for instance, where just the mere exchange of seeds between two neighbors is actually considered seed marketing. That needs to stop, and I think that will stop. And we have a great declaration to argue for that change. And second, my second hope is that seed marketing laws actually also change and with the times and offer a really diversified offer of seeds on the market, like not just seeds and varieties that have been developed for intellectual property rights systems. It cannot be linked. The two systems can't be linked. And yeah, the door needs to be open to more different seeds, even in the commercial system, in the sense of the commercial system.
Thanks. Guy, would you like to say a few short remarks on what you think needs to happen next to implement this article of the UNDROP in Europe?
Oui, à l'heure actuelle, la Commission européenne et aussi l'industrie font des propositions pour modifier toutes les réglementations qui concernent les semences. La commercialisation, les OGM, la biodiversité, l'accès aux ressources génétiques. S'il n'y a pas une forte mobilisation des organisations paysannes, mais aussi de l'ensemble des organisations de la société civile pour faire reconnaître les droits des paysans, ils vont encore renforcer les droits de propriété intellectuelle de l'industrie et anéantir définitivement les semences paysannes et aussi les semences biologiques. Pour nous, ce qu'il faut obtenir, c'est que les systèmes semenciers paysans et une réglementation spécifique fondée sur les droits des paysans et que ces systèmes semenciers paysans n'aient pas à appliquer les réglementations qui sont faites pour le système semencier industriel. Voilà l'objectif que nous devons atteindre.
Thank you, Guy. And Eric, in terms of the organic farmers, what do you think needs to happen? What would you like to see happen in the next few months to in the reform to secure the right to seeds?
Well, of course, we need to remain vigilant on what's going to happen on the reform of seed legislation on the one hand, but also on the front of GMOs, and actively resist any attempt to deregulate some of the new genetic engineering techniques. Guy talked about it. But what I would like to add is that, if we want to make the right to seeds a reality, I think it's important to also involve not only peasants, farmers and activists in the discussion, but the whole production chain. And this is what we're trying to do in the organic movement, make sure that, organic processors, specialized organic shop are aware of the importance of using, seeds which have not been bred for the industrial system, and that they actively support also all the efforts to develop organic plant breeding. Because I understand it's quite tough for organic plant breeding, there's not much support, and since there are no intellectual property rights involved as well, there's very little funding available as well. So I think one of the challenges also for the organic movement is to make sure that all the actors involved in organic actively contribute to helping farmers and organic breeders to grow more diverse seeds as well, with all the benefits that go with it.
Thanks, Eric, and thanks again to all of the speakers for their inputs and their answers this evening. It's been really interesting and thought-provoking. I will now hand over to Antonio Onorati from the European Coordination of Via Campesina for some concluding remarks for this evening. Thank you.
Yes, oui, bonsoir à tout le monde. Il est particulièrement quelquefois difficile ou enthousiasmant de faire des remarques pour une session qui a été fort pleine d'indications sur un thème qui reste un thème conflictuel. La première remarque que je veux faire, c'est peut-être de dire qu'à différence de ce qui était le panorama de better regulation, nous nous retrouvons dans une situation dans laquelle les industries sémencières européennes sont le top des industries sémencières planétaires. Comme vous le savez, sur les 6 plus grandes industries sémencières dans le globe, il y en a 4 qui sont européennes, dont la première. Et donc, la bataille ou les difficultés seront énormément plus compliquées. Deuxième remarque, finalement, nous avons un instrument politiquement fort, c'est la Déclaration des Nations Unies, et nous savons pertinemment que la conquête des droits ne se satisfait pas à soi-même. Il faut la transformer, et ça a été dit par tous les intervenants, en nouveau cadre juridique. Et ce nouveau cadre juridique, il va prendre du temps pour être réalisé. Regardant les assises que nous avons devant la Commission, les États membres et le Parlement, je crois que la difficulté plus importante va venir des États membres. Et nous l'avons vu, ça a été déjà cité par Guy Casselet, en Italie, un pays qui depuis 20 ans est GMO-free et qui malgré tout cela a eu un essai très fort de rompre cette barrière qui est le GMO-free et de changer profondément la législation sémencière. Pour ce qui est du Parlement, il y aura un grand travail à faire. Et je crois que les sensibilités ils sont présentes. Nous pouvons utiliser d'autres instruments aussi. Biodiversity Strategy de la Commission, Farm to Fork. Donc, il faudra faire un travail d'approfondissement. Mais quand on sera à la réglementation comme telle, c'est là que notre capacité d'initiative, de concertation avec les différentes visions Je sais que ceux qui étaient là pour Better Regulation savent combien a payé la Fed, qu'il y avait des différentes visions pour la conclusion de la négociation en 7 ans. Il faudra bien confronter nos différentes visions. Je crois qu'il y a une tendance beaucoup plus à la compréhension réciproque et à une vision beaucoup plus partagée, et la déclaration des Nations Unies nous aide, et nous aide un peu à tout le monde à trouver un ancrage qui est tout à fait nécessaire. Et je ne veux pas revenir sur les arguments, comme vous pouvez l'imaginer, la ligne des ECVC, c'est celle de la séparation, de l'apartheid, si vous voulez, entre les deux systèmes sémenciers. Il y a quelques risques que dans la nouvelle législation, on essaie de pousser les semences paysannes dans les systèmes industriels, et ça va à l'encontre des droits des paysans. Mais puisqu'on a encore 1 minute, je crois que les conditions sont essentiellement meilleures, si je peux dire, et ça va être long. La bataille contre les dernières modifications génétiques et l'ensemble des gene editing est une bataille qui fait brèche aussi dans la société. Encore une fois, nous l'avons vu dans les dernières initiatives. Les sociétés restent essentiellement ancrées sur l'idée qu'une bonne alimentation dérive d'une bonne agriculture, et une bonne agriculture dérive aussi d'un contrôle des semences et de la capacité de paysans de l'agriculture bio de défendre son système de production. Sur ce niveau-là, nous sommes encore dans la vision d'ensemble de la société. Donc, nous aurons, je crois, un bon support. Ça va dépendre essentiellement de nous, de notre capacité de mobilisation, de tous et de chacun. Chacun, dans sa propre organisation, a des responsabilités différentes. Et nous, en tant que mouvement paysan, nous devrons travailler encore et beaucoup, parce que les semences paysannes ne sont pas seulement un instrument de défense et de gestion dynamique de la biodiversité, sont un élément essentiel et fondamental de l'économie paysanne. Économiquement, on n'en parle quelquefois pas trop, mais économiquement, le contrôle sur les semences et l'autonomie sur les semences est un pilier pour la survie des petites et moyennes exploitations agricoles, surtout celles qui sont en agroécologie ou qui sont en bio, ou tout simplement qui sont dans des conditions de difficulté dans des zones européennes plus en difficulté. Cela dit, je demande à le fait qu'il faudra bien terminer. Catherine, je crois qu'on a bien terminé, donc je te passe la parole. Je remercie tout le monde, et c'est bien de voir que des luttes qui durent des décennies, finalement, ils arrivent. Et certains d'entre nous, ils étaient là au moment que tout cela a commencé. C'est une question d'âge. Et voir avancer et voir les transformer dans la plus grande puissance agricole, économique de la planète, et leur poser une belle question sur les droits des paysans, ça me paraît un très bon résultat. Et merci donc à tous ceux qui se sont engagés dans cette bataille. Catherine, je vous passe la parole.
Thank you very much for those inspiring concluding words. I think, Christoph, if you would like to bring us out of the evening. I think first I would just like to say thank you very much to the interpreters who've done sterling work to help us all understand the discussion this evening. Thank you very much, and apologies if we were sometimes talking a little bit fast for you, but thank you very much. Now, Christoph, I will hand over to you to say the last.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much for everyone. It was fantastic to have more than 100 people discussing that. And as said many times, one of the objectives is also to get to more common positions, to lobby, to fight for the right to seats in be promoted and protected in these revisions of the seed laws in the European Union. And so that's a great achievement to have at least been able to discuss all together. It was great to have Sandra Pereira from the Parliament and IFOAM and Archenoa and ECVC. It was fantastic to continue the work together. We will, with Fulia, we are finalizing a new guide, a publication on the right to seeds in Europe. We are transforming the publication that you have maybe seen from 2019 into a practical manual with boxes, with examples of good practices from EU countries. So it will be released in the coming weeks, and we will send it to you all. It will be on the Geneva Academy website. And so that's just the beginning of the journey. And we hope that we can continue in the next few months and few years to lobby states and the European Union institutions so that they better protect the right to seeds. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening for more than 1 hour 30, and see you soon.